And the question that I asked a little bit earlier, but I'll send it again, what proportion of your technical, or of your problems, in fact, are non-technical? So if you have a mind to respond to that by chat, that will be lovely. Let me just go back to this quick story, since you didn't hear the story. This was a terrible thing, and some of you may have read about it in the press and seen the follow-up report, where for many years the relatives of the pilots involved in the RAF Chinook crash were trying to fight to clear their loved ones' names, because the fingers were pointed and pilot error was blamed, and in fact it was nothing of the kind. And it's well worth Googling this one and looking at the report to see what kind of errors people make in pointing the finger of blame. One thing that often happens is that because we're in a huge hurry, we look at the last thing that was changed. There was an upgrade, and there was a release, something happened, and we're looking at the last known activity because we know that cause comes from change. And so, of course, it's a really natural thing to do, to go looking for that cause, and the last known change is a good place to start. But what we don't want to do is what a lot of organizations institutionalize, which is ask the who question too early. Because identifying the people involved is not necessarily going to help us look for cause. And as soon as people feel the finger of blame pointing at them, then of course there's a natural tendency to clam up and perhaps not be as free with information as we need those folks to be. And of course we hope we don't club them unconscious, although it does feel like that. And in many organizations it's not just a question of blame or pointing the fingers, but also the person that points out a problem often becomes the person who is given the task to sort it out. So there's of course going to be a natural reluctance if every time you point out a problem, the next thing that happens is you get a load of extra work. So one of the things that problem analysis does for us at KT is to give colleagues and customers a proper explanation and diagnosis. Now, it is easy to fall into this. You know, we do this at home. You know, our loved ones always do this, or they always do that. Sometimes something goes wrong and we look at somebody and think, well, they've only been doing the job 6 months. How could they know? People blame motivation, whatever that means. Motivation is a very big word covering a multitude of sins. And as we all know, most performance issues are caused by the system, not by the individual. The average person, there may be some exceptions, but the average person comes to work to do a decent day's work for a decent day's pay, and they don't come to work to make all our lives a misery. There may be some exceptions in your organization, but we won't go into that. So many people responding, as you can see in the chat box, or not, because this is private. So 50-50 seems to be a popular proportion of non-technical problems, and for some people as much as 75%. So the answer to this is always start, as we do with everything else related to technical problems, with a problem specification. But here you have a representation of one of the pages in your problem analysis section. If you went on a problem solving and decision making class, you'll find this towards the back of the problem analysis section. So a special section on how to handle people problems. Also KT Resolve has a similar section towards the back of problem analysis. And then we change the questions subtly. But even then it may not be appropriate to ask the who question, because often what we see is not a who artifact in a problem. So what do I mean by that? So often you say, well, these people didn't test their latest release properly. Well, okay. What did you actually see? Well, the release caused exception 942 at step 14. Okay. So what we saw, the object and the deviation, step 42, exception 942, is very different from blaming a particular set of testers. So unless we saw somebody doing something particular that we want to investigate, and remember that problem analysis is also for positive deviations. So if you see an exceptionally good activity in a project or in a testing cycle or in engineering or anywhere else, then you might want to investigate why that person's doing that particular thing that way, because you can learn from it. So as often as not, we shouldn't be really asking questions which lead to putting a person into our specification, but sometimes we will when we see something particularly good being done by the individual. Fred has coded his particular module this way, which has been very good, but we don't quite understand why he's done it. We'd like to understand why he's done it because we can learn from it. So moving swiftly on. When you deal with people and teams, I think it's good to focus on what happened, when it happened, and under what circumstances. And most importantly, as with everything else, capture the is not. So here's an application. Or an example of a problem analysis where people are indeed not testing completely, and we want to know why. So rather than putting the people into the box, we actually put what it is that we found that was not tested as completely as possible. So in this particular example, one particular type of application projects had incomplete testing, but other projects did not. And we can be a bit more specific about what testing incomplete means, but I can't be more specific because that would give customer information away. So I'll leave it at a vague level for the purpose of this example. But it's interesting that the testing was incomplete in certain respects, but there wasn't an absence of testing, and there wasn't a late delivery or over budget situation. And it's only applying to testing activities done at headquarters, not elsewhere. So there's kind of an interesting thing, a picture developing here, which you can start then to look for distinctions between the HQ activities and the way that place is managed and the way the processes work as compared with other regional offices. So, and the timing is also kind of crucial in all of this, because something may have changed in the way that the processes operate in an organization, which is perhaps driving people to work in a slightly different way from before. But these things are really important here. And then also we can start to think about other activities which are nothing to do with technology or software, but sales, for example. So one of the great uses of problem analysis is to understand why we're not selling what we think we ought to be selling. The customers said they loved it, the market research said the customers love it, everybody says they want it, but for some reason these products aren't selling. And then you start to look at exactly what the situation is. It's only one type of product and not certain others. It's only in one region and not certain others. And then you have a richness of information where, again, you can investigate the distinctions and changes and start to come up with a hypothesis that explains why you're having a problem with these products in these certain areas. And the same thing will also apply to projects. You'll find some project activities are going particularly well and others are not going so well. Again, it is deliverables A, B, C and not deliverables D, E, F. And you start to have a look at what's involved in those things in order to come up with a reasonable explanation for why it is some things are not working. Can I just ask a quick question? Again, respond by chat or unmute yourself and talk if you prefer to do that. How many folks in the webcast today have tried problem analysis for completely non-technical purposes so far? How many of you have tried problem analysis for a completely non-technical purpose? Well, there's one from Peter Harvey. Thank you very much, Peter. And Natalie privately. Excellent. It's well worthwhile doing. And one of the things that it also works for, just on a personal level, I had a look at my golf swing with this. I said, well, maybe that's kind of technical, but at any rate, it's not work related. And so I started to have a look at this, and I asked my wife to have a look at this as well. And I said, well, you know, it is a slice. It's not a hook. It's happening more with low-numbered irons than with high-numbered irons. and you start to get a picture of what's going on that's different when you're swinging one club compared with another, and start to build up a picture of what you should change in the way you grip the golf club. Same could apply to tennis or swimming or almost anything. And when you diagnose the work of the people around you, looking for those small nuanced differences will help you enormously to figure out why it is they're not behaving the way you want them to do. And this also applies to clients. You know, clients also can be diagnosed a little bit with problem analysis if perhaps a client is not being cooperative in the way that we want them to be in order to help them solve their problem. Then you can also use the same technique to try and get there. Which brings us to the performance system. Again, towards the back of your red or problem analysis section, there's a little bit there about the performance system. And as often as not, it's this that is responsible for people's behavior. We're all of us living in a situation that we have to live with. You know, the processes are maybe not perfect. We maybe don't have the right tools. I once saw a well-known consulting firm working on their proposals on 10-year-old laptops, and I thought, good God, this is ridiculous. These people are not properly equipped. So the situation may be poor, and that may drive poorer performance. So look at the situation. Do people have the right tools? And more particularly, have we made the expectations clear? You know, as often as not, we find that people have a slightly skewed view of what they should be doing. And why is that? Because nobody's made it crystal clear to them what they should be doing. And so that's where the performance shortfall or deviation comes from. The other thing that's important is, are we measuring the right things? Are we measuring folks' quality of work in ways that are meaningful so that we can actually detect what's really going on? Let me talk a little bit about recognition or consequences. As often as not, the consequences for doing really excellent work are not very positive. So somebody completes a real dog, a really nasty project, and guess what? They get given more difficult projects to do. And that may or may not be a reward for that individual. Equally, you will find that sometimes people are being rewarded materially for fixing more tickets. And my favorite example was a young fellow in Krakow in a shared service center who's marked out as the greatest problem solver since sliced bread. And I just asked him, how do you do it? And he said, well, it's simple. There's a bonus for this, so I come in early and take all the easy tickets. Oh, wow. You know, you have to watch out when there are consequences or rewards or recognition for the wrong things. And of course, there's interesting behavior. And we're all pretty experienced people, and every single one of us knows how to game almost any system that can be invented. So we have to be careful with that. But most important, is there an effective feedback loop? Who is there? What is there to tell you that you've completed this package of work, this task, this deliverable really well, and therefore that's what you should be doing more of? And equally, if something hasn't worked terribly well, somebody or some system to give you a piece of feedback to help you improve for the future. So almost always when we're looking at people performance problems, we are looking at the performance system and its elements for the elements of cause. So as we come to the end, I'm quite happy to chat with you either using the chat box or if you want to unmute yourself and ask any questions. But I think it's worth just trying this stuff out and list one thing that other people do that cause you some difficulties, and then go and create a problem specification. Just do that quickly on a scrap of paper, line down the middle. It is this and it's not that. It's in these circumstances, not those circumstances. It's these people and not those people, if the people are relevant. And then look for causes in that performance system. And if you do find some things like inappropriate expectation set, inappropriate rewards, inappropriate feedback systems, discuss your views with relevant stakeholders and modify those expectations. Change the reward or recognition and see what else or what's different should we measure or feedback. There are some more examples of this in New Rational Manager, and if you've either lost your copy or you didn't have one for whatever reason, please do email into the office or to me directly, and we'll give you an e-copy of New Rational Manager. You can find me here, and thank you very much all for listening and attending this morning. I hope this provides a kickstart to your weekend if you're playing golf, and I hope you enjoy your holidays if you're going on holiday soon.